Gas fitter exam cram session, video 17. Okay, before we continue with depth of the gas service, as I'm reviewing the previous video, something was really gnawing at me, something bugged me, so I looked into the code to double check. So, where we were talking about the gas meters and equipment being an open floor area. This is question 25-26. Okay, we established that combustibles, we said combustibles would be a certain number, and then we said source of ignition, you know, a boiler for example, would be another number. Those two numbers, not correct. Okay, they should be 425. When gas meters and equipment are located in an open floor area, no combustible material shall be stored within 5 feet. 5 feet. So combustible materials, 5 feet. And question 26. When gas meters and equipment are located in an open floor area, the gas meter should not be within 3 feet. 3 feet of the boiler or source of ignition. These are our numbers for meters and meter equipment in an open floor area. So ignore the answers I gave before. Make the appropriate changes in your answer sheet, your answer key for test 2, questions 25, 26, and test 2. If you can salvage some kind of memory aid, whatever, from how I went over those two, good. If not, we will be hitting these questions again, I'm certain, because they keep repeating. We'll reinforce the correct numbers as per the code. In the meantime, I do want to at least get all of this under our belt, and then we can fine-tune things here and there. But the most important thing is let's catch this mistake as soon as possible, and it should be question 25. The answer should be 5. It's 5 feet. Combustibles, no more than 5 feet to the meter. Source of ignition, no more than 3 feet to the meter. No, I'm sorry, no closer than 3 feet. Closer than 5, no closer than 3. 5 and 3. All right, let's go back to the gas service piping. I believe I was mentioning that the number 2 is a good number because this 2 or 24 inches. Remember, take your pick however you want. The valve, the control valve for the gas inside the building, no more than 2 feet from point of entry. The service, no less than 2 feet below grade. Okay. Let's see. Question 30. Now, of course, there's always exceptions. Question 30. Gas piping may be buried not less than 18 inches below grade if properly protected and not located under a driveway. Properly protected means if we're going less than 18, we're generally talking about, of course, any loading stresses, freezing, you know, the pipe is wrapped to protect against freezing. So we can decrease this to 18 inches. So that's 1.5 feet. It's another number the code loves. We can decrease this to 18 inches or 1.5 feet if it's properly protected and it cannot be underneath a driveway. You can imagine a driveway is, you know, is generally going to be thinner. It's definitely going to be supporting a constant stress from vehicles over it. Vehicles are what? Close to 2 tons. They're worried about that. The constant vehicles going back and forth over it on a driveway is going to produce too much of a load stress. So no driveways. As long as we're not dealing with the driveway and the piping is properly protected, I would say against other loads or freezing, you can go go down 18. You don't have to observe the blanket 24. Okay. Let's see. So one of the things, if properly protected. So question 31 shows another thing they were worried about. If we're going to install gas piping less than 2 feet below the ground, it shall be protected against frost unless, and this harkens back to outside meter piping, unless it's certified dry gas. If it's certified dry gas, which it will likely be, we don't have to worry about that. Okay. If it is wet gas and it's less than 2 feet below the ground, they're asking you to do something about it to protect against freezing. So wrapping it up, insulating it. Question 32. Here we go with the hanger spacing. This one here, we only have 2 questions, but we're going to use this as the cue to start learning our intervals. Question 32. The maximum spacing for 1.25" or larger horizontal gas piping is 12. And question 33. The maximum spacing for 1.25" or larger vertical gas piping is every floor. Question 33 is kind of a trick question. All vertical gas piping. Don't worry about the size anymore. Every floor. Every floor, every floor, every floor. Put a riser clamp or put, a wall anchor, anything. But every floor, there's got to be some kind of securing of that pipe. Okay? You're not going to have more than two floors worth of load on any one support. Every support on every floor means that support is only carrying 1 full floor's worth of load. Okay? All right, so this is our cue. For this, we'll go to the table in the back. Okay, on the back page, the top one, support intervals. You're going to be asked several questions on support intervals. 4 at the very least, can be more. So, these 2 questions about 1.25", I designed them to introduce you to the concept of a limit, of the fact that you need to know your intervals. But notice how I harped on 1.25". Okay. The table itself, we'll start out just take an overall view of the table. We want our highs and our lows, and then we're going to see what strikes us. So, the support intervals. As far as the table goes, its lowest size is 1/2 inch. So that's our low limit. We know that 1/2 inch pipe is going to be the smallest pipe we're dealing with. What's the highest limit? Well, I'm going to ignore vertical for a moment, and we're just going to go to the highest number we see, and that's 1.25" and up. And in keeping with, once we know that we've established that a limit might include either below or above, we're not going to harp on the words. We're not going to keep concentrating on the words. We're going to just try and remember the number, and the number we're going to also know implies this or that. So the largest size is 1.25" and larger. For now, how about I just go with a little arrow, 1.25" and up. And eventually we'll even get rid of the arrow, the tick marks for inches. We'll have just pure numbers. But for now, 1/2 inch is the smallest size. 1.25" is the biggest size. And up, anything bigger, it's implied. And what else are we left? Well, in the middle. So, in the middle we have 3/4 and 1 inch. And I believe that is not how they put it in the actual code. So already I'm taking certain liberties, and let's see. Nope, they do that. They actually do that. In the table in the code itself, they actually put 3/4 and 1 inch in the same line. Good for them. They could have added extra lines. They're getting the idea too, right? So 3/4 and 1 inch. So 3/4 and 1 inch. Okay. So vertical is easy. Vertical is just one blanket statement for vertical piping, right? Every floor. Now, this can be a tricky one too, because when you're looking at these questions and you're reading the question, blah, 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 for size piping, hangers, blah, 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 you might be a little too quick reading over vertical, and you're just assuming, oh, horizontal, because, and I've done this with the questions on purpose, when I'm asking for vertical, to make sure you get used to the idea to always pay attention, I will put numbers. And if you're just glossing over it, thinking, I know the answer, whatever, you're going to think, oh, this is asking about horizontal, and you're going to put down the correct answer for horizontal. Good for you. Unfortunately, in the question, if you go back and read the question, it's like, oh no, they were asking for vertical. So, be very careful. That's one of the pitfalls I see for vertical, that you won't read the word vertical in the question. And that's a shame, because vertical is the easiest answer every floor. Okay, the question size I started you off with was 1.25 inches, because 1.25 inches and anything after that is easy. That's a whole group of piping right there that you only got to know one number. So, how about we do that? 1.25 inches is going to be 12. Now, unfortunately, there's really no coincidence or kind of affinity. So, although we catch a break in that this table has probably the least amount of information as compared to the threads, as compared to purging, each information is kind of like on its own. All right, so 12. So 12 is going to be the highest number. 12 feet is going to be the highest number. And this is horizontal piping. The smallest number, 1/2 inch, is going to be 6 feet. Okay? Already I see 6 is half of 12. That might help when we're hitting a block. And in the middle, what's in the middle? 3/4 and 1. That's going to be 8 feet. All right. If we remember our high and low limits, then we'll remember that our high and low limits are by themselves. The low limit is 1/2 inch. That's it. The high limit is 1.25 inches and up, but we'll say 1.25 inches and that's it. The only two other sizes, because this is the advantage we have being plumbers, we know our sizes right off the bat. That's something we really don't have to memorize. It's like, we go from 1/2 inch to 1.25 inches. What would those sizes be? 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch, 1.25 inches. We're done. What about 1.5 inches, 2 inch, 2.5, 4 inch? Well, that's implied by the 1.25 inches. So, 1/2 inch is the lowest. It's just 1/2 inch. 1.25 inches is the highest. It's just 1.25 inches. There's only really 3 entries. I kind of don't count this one. So, what are the only other two sizes left? 3/4 and 1 inch. They're both together. They get 8. I really can only tell you when I work with this table that I just remember the boundaries, 3/4 and 1 are together, and the cadence. In this one here, the numbers are different, but there's some kind of rhythm. There's some kind of cadence. 6, 8, 12. 6, 8, 12, you know? If you just remember it, that you just repeat it to yourself, 6, 8, 12, 6, 8, 12, okay? 1/2 inch is 6 feet. That's it. The highest number is 12. It's double 6. What's in the middle? There's no good arithmetic progression because, well, it's not an even step. It's not the same step from 6 to 8 as 8 to 12. I'm not going to say the numbers because I don't want to taint or pollute your mind. I only want to say numbers that actually exist. So on the test, and this is another viable thing that happens. Let's say on the test, you that's it. You're at your wit's end. You're just not sure. Nothing's helping. There's no trick. It's like you just can't remember that number. You remember my voice. You remember hearing me talk. Ad nauseum even. You can remember. It's like, did I ever hear him say that? Did I ever hear him say this? It's like, I heard him say this. You look through the choices, like, I never heard him say that number. Or, I don't really remember his voice in that number. But this number here, I've heard him say that number a lot, or whatever. So, as much as I would say, oh, well, blah, 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 did this between 8 and then 8. But if I say those numbers, you'll remember those numbers. What numbers will you remember? The only ones I'm saying, 6, 8, 12. They're all even numbers. They all feel nice and round. They're numbers 6 and 12 we're used to. 8. You know what? I'm not perfect. Didn't I say that in purging? What was it? 8-inch and larger purges at any distance, any length of piping. And then I said that's an easy number to remember because, well, it's probably the only place it shows up. Gee, I guess I'm wrong. I mean, it showed up again. Where did it show up? It showed up here. Well, let's make lemonade out of lemons, right? Okay, I was wrong. 8 shows up again. And how wonderful for us it shows up here because that's a number we need to remember. And now 8 we're going to remember. Not only is it the interval for our hangers for horizontal 3/4 1 inch, it's also the size at which we're going to purge no matter what the linear footage of pipe we're dealing with. So that's another way to remember it because now 8 does work. I always like to make my numbers do a lot of work. One number does a lot of work for me. One number triggers a lot of information for me. A lot of stuff gets tied together even if it's not directly related by a number. And once again, if you can get these numbers, if you can tame them, manage them, corral them, get them to, move when you want, that's the key to this exam. Because with the right numbers, you can get the answers right. With the wrong numbers, even though everything else is right, it's going to be wrong. Correct? So the numbers are important. Hopefully you become almost as obsessive as me with them, and you'll be happy come test time. So 6, 8, 12. 6, 8, 12. I usually just think it in my head or write it out. 6, 8, 12. And another thing, why am I working towards getting you to gradually, as we go on and repeat? We're only at the beginning of test 2, so we still have work to do. We will constantly be going over this. Why are we refining this to get it as abstract as possible? 1, it's going to make it easier for the numbers to hit you. 2, do you remember legal cheating? Do you remember what I said to do with the piece of scrap paper? You're worried you're not going to remember all of this. That's a very well-grounded concern. I'm worried I'm not going to remember all of this because it's easy to forget. I said, in a corner of the paper, your upper right hand, upper left hand, put it in the bottom. I don't care. Put it on the back. I think I would have. I know on the decast on the decast test with the actual paper, you can do the front and the back. I really didn't do anything with the the fancy laminated sheet that they gave me, but I'm assuming you could turn it over and write on the back too, But wherever you want to put it, 6, 8, 12. Maybe you'll remember this. you know, inch and a quarter. It's why I did that question, inch and a quarter, to get you started right off the bat with getting an inch and a quarter in your head. That's a limit. You could do, you know, you could do 1/2, you know, inch and a quarter, and then, you know, everything in between if you want, and then 6, 8, 12. You don't need to write what this means. You've been working on this, refining it, that you know what all the numbers mean. You just need the numbers. This is a lot faster to write, because if you're going to write all that information before you even take the test, you know, once you sit down and test starts, you don't want to spend any more time than necessary. If you can get the stuff down that you're worried about and just jot down the numbers, you know, with as little time as necessary, well, then that's more time for the exam, and that's all you need. You need the triggers just to make sure you're accurate. So you write 6, 8, 12, 6, 8, 12. That tempo. You're going to learn it like a song. What's easier to learn than a song? You know, it's like you could probably recite the lyrics to a lot of songs that you made no effort in your life to try to learn, but you know all the words to, because you just kept repeating it, and because a song puts it in a certain cadence or rhythm, your brain likes that. Songs are easier to learn than passages. Okay? Romeo and Juliet, you want to play Romeo or Juliet, you need time to learn the, you know, the soliloquies. Songs doesn't really require that much work, does it? Okay, so 6, 8, 12, you know. Other things you could do is say, well, they were all even numbers, or this or that, etc. Okay? But that is our start with working on the one of the 4 very important tables. So important that I put them in the back for you for quick reference, so that you constantly go back and forth, constantly refer to them, and keep refining your memory of them. Support intervals, extremely important. Like I said, these numbers, you have to know them cold. Every single one. You will be asked. There's no way to predict which ones you don't have to know. It's like, you got to know all of them. Know all of them. Sorry. Okay? So, that's it. And I think you're probably this is probably going to be the first table you're going to be very comfortable with, because it's just 1/2 through inch and a quarter, 6, 8, 12. Vertical, every floor. All right. So that's those 2 questions. Yes, so 32, to reiterate, the maximum spacing for inch and a quarter or larger horizontal gas piping is 12 feet. Okay? 6, 8, 12, 12 feet. The maximum spacing for inch and a quarter or larger vertical, all vertical, every floor. Didn't even have to tell me what size. Every floor. 34. Gas pressure relieving limiting devices shall not be required when source pressures are 5 psi or less, and regulator connections are 2 inches or less. That's a little bit advanced. This was not even in the 2008 code. This showed up in the 2014 code. It's been added to the very end. For now, we'll just, you know, we'll read it one more time with the answers, just so that that's the first time we've been exposed to it. But that one's a little more advanced, and I would say that's going to take some time to sink in. And it would be nice if I went into exactly what all that is in the code in plain English. If you're reading through, I actually give you a picture of what a pressure relieving limiting device will be. It's not the vent limiting device. It's along that same principle, but the vent limiting device, that's for the vent off the regulator. This is a gas pressure relieving limiting device, which is attached. It's a part of the passageway of the regulator. Could be piped in line with the regulator. It's a similar device, but it's for the actual flow, not for the venting of it. So let's just look at it, be exposed to it, and then we'll come back later when we have some much more common information under our belt that, we can spend more time on this one. Gas pressure relieving limiting devices shall not be required when source pressures are 5 psi or less. So, anything over 5 psi will need a vent limiting device. And the regulator connections are 2 inches or less. Okay, so if we have a system where we have 5 psi in the system and it's 2 inches or less, the piping, the distribution piping we're dealing with is 2 inches or less, we don't need one of these gas pressure relieving limiting devices. So off the bat it tells you that these things are meant for higher pressures, bigger sizes, because that's when situations become much, much worse, because higher pressure means we can produce a greater amount of volume. Bigger lines means we have more, so the pressure, the amount of the extra amount of gas, that's a lot more gas in a short amount of time. That's a situation. So for now, 5 psi, anything over 5 psi, anything over 2 inches, okay, will require a gas pressure relieving limiting device. We'll cover that more in detail. I think that's better for a future examination. All right, question 35. Where allowed by the utility, a test fitting drip leg, sediment trap, shall be installed downstream of a lockable supply riser valve. We're never going to get away from upstream and downstream. So downstream means we got the valve, the flow is coming this way, the flow is this way. The shut-off valve to the device is here. The appliance is over here. So downstream means it's on the other side. Downstream means we shut the valve, that shuts the gas to the drip leg, the test fitting, sediment trap. Okay, downstream means that if it's downstream of the valve, that valve is shutting off the supply to it. Question 36, the present code allows an owner of a prior code building to use older versions of the code as applicable. The 1938 New York City Building Code may be used prior to December 6, 1968. Why is that? This question could be rephrased as, when did the 1968 New York City Building Code go into effect? Would be December 6th, 1968. So, if you own a building that was built during, at the time when you were working under the 1938 Building Code, you're good to go. If, I would say, you have a building where you got the permit for it, and under the 1938 New York City Building Code. So if you got the permit for it in 1967, but you didn't start working on it until December 7th of 1968, you're out of luck. Gotta go with the 1968 code. Can't go with the 1938 code. All right. If you want to pull hairs, there's always a grace period. But for the sake of this question, so we understand what they're asking, December 6th is the cutoff date. Before December 6th, 1968, you could use the 1938 code. After December 6th, 1968, you gotta use the 1968 code. So, as long as, and there's going to be a stipulation, as long as there is no danger to life or property, the piping that is existing as per 1938 code can stay, even though we're working with 2014 code or 2008 code when we were using that, or 1968 code before we were using the new codes. Okay? Main thing is December 6th. You think that's a really detailed question? I'm going to tell you right now, I think it's a really detailed question. Guess what? It shows up. They want you to know your way around the actual code.